12,000 years ago, before writing, before farming, before the first known cities, humans built something extraordinary. It was a time of immense change. The last ice age, a cold and harsh period known as the Younger Dryas, was just coming to an end. Massive glaciers were melting, sea levels were rising, and the world was beginning to transform. Humans, who had survived as nomadic hunter-gatherers for tens of thousands of years, were adapting to a warmer, more fertile planet. It was in this pivotal moment, on the cusp of an agricultural revolution, that a group of people with no metal tools and no permanent homes came together to create something that would outlast empires. Hidden beneath the hills of modern-day Turkey lies Göbekli Tepe, the world's oldest known temple. Built in 9600 BCE, it is more than twice as old as the pyramids of Egypt. And it rewrites everything we thought we knew about the dawn of civilization. But who built Göbekli Tepe? Why did they construct such massive monuments long before humans had farms, cities, or metal tools? And why, after centuries of use, did they bury the site under tons of earth? This is the mystery of Göbekli Tepe, the ancient temple that defies history. Our story of this baffling site begins, not with a grand discovery, but with an oversight. In 1963, American archaeologists from the University of Chicago and Istanbul University were conducting a wide-ranging survey of the region. Their goal was to document all known archaeological sites and look for new ones. They came across a large, flat-topped hill with strange T-shaped stones jutting out of the ground. The hill itself was unusual, covered in what they believed were thousands of limestone fragments, which they dismissed as debris from a medieval cemetery. They were looking for evidence of the ancient Romans or Greeks, perhaps even earlier, but their initial assessment was clouded by preconceived notions. They dug a small trench and, based on the pottery shards they found, concluded the stones were medieval and largely unimportant. They marked it down in their records and moved on. The location was labeled as Koba Tepe, a common name for a hill. But the locals had a different name for it, Göbekli Tepe, which in Turkish means potbelly hill. A simple name for a place that held a secret that would shake the foundations of human history. For over 30 years the site lay dormant, its true significance hidden under a thin layer of soil. The hill, however, continued to be a mystery to the local shepherds and farmers who would often find stone flakes and strange carvings while tending their flocks. They knew there was something special about the hill, but its true age and purpose were beyond imagination. Then, in 1994, a German archaeologist named Klaus Schmidt came across the old survey notes. As he was looking for a different site, something about the description of those T-shaped stones caught his attention. He was a specialist in the early Neolithic, and he immediately saw a connection between the strange T-shape and a similar, but much smaller stone found at a nearby site he had excavated. The American report had also mentioned a vast number of flint tools on the surface of the hill, tools that were unmistakably from the Stone Age. He knew in his gut that the initial assessment was wrong. He decided to revisit the hill. When he arrived, he immediately knew the initial assessment was wrong. He could see that the hill was no ordinary hill. It was an artificial mound, a tell formed by centuries of human activity. And those strange stones? They were not medieval, but something far, far older. Schmidt was an expert in the Neolithic period, the era of the first farmers. The style of the tools and artifacts he found on the surface hinted at a time long before the great civilizations of Mesopotamia or Egypt. What he was about to discover would challenge every textbook and change the story of humanity. He started a small, focused excavation with his team, and their first spadefuls of earth confirmed his suspicions. Just beneath the surface they found the tops of the massive stone pillars. The discovery wasn't a quick or simple one. For years, the team carefully and methodically uncovered a series of massive stone enclosures, each a masterpiece of ancient engineering. The work was slow and meticulous, with each shovel of dirt revealing more and more of the prehistoric puzzle. They worked in the relentless heat of the Turkish sun, but every new find brought with it a jolt of excitement. It was clear that this wasn't just a simple structure, it was a sprawling, complex site. Excavations began almost immediately, and what they revealed was nothing short of a miracle of preservation. Schmidt and his team unearthed massive circular enclosures, some 30 meters in diameter, with enormous T-shaped stone pillars, or megaliths, at their center. These pillars stood as high as 18 feet tall and weighed up to 20 tons. They were carved from the local limestone with incredible precision. But it was the carvings on these stones that truly captivated the world's attention. The pillars were covered in stunning reliefs of wild, ferocious animals: lions, vultures, scorpions, snakes, spiders, and wild boars. It was a menagerie of the untamed world. There were no domesticated animals, no images of people farming or living in a settled community. This was a world of hunter-gatherers, a world of instinct and survival. These people lived in a time when humans were not masters of their environment, but a part of it. The animal carvings weren't just simple decorations. They were the central language of the temple. Archaeologists believe these animals held deep symbolic and spiritual meaning. They were perhaps totems representing different clans or tribes that gathered here. The presence of so many different species from different ecological niches, from the fierce wild boar to the small, cunning fox, suggests that this was a place where diverse groups came together, perhaps to share in a common belief system. The most shocking part, however, was the date. Carbon dating placed the oldest layers of Göbekli Tepe at a staggering 9600 BCE. To put that in perspective, this site is 7,000 years older than Stonehenge, and over 7,600 years older than the Great Pyramids of Giza. It predates the invention of pottery, the use of bronze, and even the establishment of the first permanent settlements in Mesopotamia. It was a discovery so out of place that it was almost unbelievable. The revelation turned the field of archaeology on its head. For decades, the standard narrative of human development was a linear one. It went like this. First, humans were nomadic hunter-gatherers, living a hand-to-mouth existence. Then, around 10,000 BCE, they began to domesticate plants and animals. This agricultural revolution, the Neolithic Revolution, created a food surplus. The surplus allowed people to settle down and form permanent villages, freeing them from the constant search for food. These villages grew into cities. And as populations grew, so did the need for social organization, which led to the creation of temples, government, and a complex society. This was the farming first model of civilization, a theory that had been taught for a century. Göbekli Tepe flips this idea on its head. It suggests a temple's first model. Here, a massive, complex temple was built before the invention of agriculture. This completely upends our understanding of human development. It suggests that a shared sense of spirituality, ritual, or community, perhaps even religion, was the driving force that united people and led them to form large-scale cooperative projects. The act of building the temple may have been the very reason they needed to create a more organized society, a society that would eventually lead to farming and permanent settlements. The site itself looks less like a single temple and more like a massive ceremonial complex. Archaeologists have identified at least 20 circular enclosures buried on the hill, but only a few have been fully excavated. Each enclosure has two massive T-shaped pillars at its center and is ringed by smaller pillars embedded in the circular walls. The T-shape of the pillars is believed to represent a stylized human form. The two central pillars might represent the most important figures in the ritual, perhaps gods or powerful ancestors. They have long arms carved along their sides, ending with hands at the front and a simple loincloth at the back, leaving no doubt that they are meant to be people. The enclosures are not all the same. Enclosure A is a massive, oval-shaped structure. Enclosure B features a carving of two foxes on its central pillars, their arms wrapped around the pillars in a pose that almost looks like a hug. Enclosure C has a powerful wild boar on one of its central pillars, while enclosure D, the most spectacular of all, is where many of the most intricate and puzzling carvings are found. The sheer variety in style and scale suggests that these enclosures may have been built by different groups of people over time, or for different purposes. This wasn't a one-time project. It was a continuous evolving spiritual hub that grew in complexity over centuries. Göbekli Tepe may have been a place of gathering, feasting, and ritual, a central hub that united diverse tribes across vast regions. This wasn't a village. There are no signs of houses, kitchens, or any of the artifacts of daily life. Instead, archaeologists found immense quantities of animal bones, particularly from wild cattle and gazelles. This evidence points to massive feasts, where thousands of people may have gathered to share food and participate in rituals. This communal feasting would have been a powerful social glue, cementing bonds between different groups of hunter-gatherers and reinforcing a shared identity and purpose. The very act of traveling to and from this site and participating in its rituals would have created the social networks necessary for cooperation on a monumental scale. The scale of the feasting is truly staggering. One analysis of the bones found at the site suggests that a single feast could have involved up to 1,000 wild cattle. The sheer logistics of hunting, preparing, and serving that much meat would have required incredible organization and collaboration, far beyond what was previously believed possible for a hunter-gatherer society. The carvings themselves are a powerful clue to the spiritual world of these people. The reliefs of wild animals could be totems, representing different tribes or clans. The lions could represent courage, the vultures a symbol of death and the afterlife, and the snakes a symbol of transformation. The frequent depiction of vultures is particularly intriguing. In many ancient cultures, vultures were associated with sky burials, where the dead were left on elevated platforms to be consumed by birds of prey. The bones found at the site, which often lack signs of cremation or burial, support the theory that this was a burial site. This would make Göbekli Tepe a place to honor the dead and connect with the spiritual world. One of the most famous carvings found on Pillar 43 in Enclosure D is often called the Vulture Stone. It depicts a vulture with a circle above its wing, a scorpion, a long-legged bird, a snake, and a headless man. It's a complex tableau that some scholars, like amateur archaeologist Graham Hancock, have interpreted as a depiction of a catastrophic event. They argue the symbols represent constellations, and that the headless man is a symbol of a cometary impact that occurred around 10,950 BCE, an event known as the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis. While highly controversial, this theory highlights the incredible complexity and potential meaning behind these carvings. Some of the most intriguing carvings are more abstract. One pillar shows a strange figure that looks like a headless man with an erection. Another shows a line of vultures, a spider, and a scorpion in a sequence. Some scholars have suggested these could be a proto-writing system, a form of symbolic narrative that predates cuneiform and hieroglyphs. This raises the tantalizing possibility that the people of Göbekli Tepe were not just builders but also the inventors of a lost language of symbols. The mysteries of Göbekli Tepe have given rise to a wide range of speculation and theories. Some scholars, like Klaus Schmidt himself, believe Göbekli Tepe was the birthplace of organized religion. The very act of creating such a complex spiritual center would have required a shared belief system and a new kind of social structure. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about meaning, purpose, and community. The temple may have provided a reason for people to come together in large groups, eventually leading them to settle down and domesticate plants and animals to feed these gatherings. The very location of Göbekli Tepe is a clue. It sits at the very heart of the Fertile Crescent, the cradle of agriculture. The wild ancestor of einkorn wheat, one of the first domesticated crops, grows wild in the hills surrounding Göbekli Tepe. It's possible that the need to provide vast amounts of food for these monumental feasts led to the intensive gathering of wild grains, a practice that eventually transitioned into farming. The temple didn't just predate agriculture, it may have been the very engine that drove its invention. The social organization, the collective effort, and the logistical challenges of supporting a large population for ritual purposes may have been the very catalysts that pushed humanity toward a new way of life. Others suggest it was a school of astronomy, a celestial observatory aligned with specific stars and constellations. The two central pillars in one of the enclosures are oriented in a way that aligns with the rising of the bright star Sirius around 9600 BCE. Sirius, the dog star, was an important marker for ancient peoples, signaling the arrival of the Nile flood for the Egyptians and the beginning of summer for others. Could these pillars have been a kind of celestial clock, used to track time and predict the seasons? The carvings of scorpions and spiders could also represent constellations. This theory suggests that these hunter-gatherers were not just spiritual, they were also keen observers of the night sky, using their astronomical knowledge to guide their rituals and perhaps even their movements. The precise alignment of the circles and the sheer effort involved in carving and moving these stones suggest a deep and sophisticated understanding of both engineering and celestial mechanics. This wasn't a random placement, it was a carefully planned astronomical monument. And then there are the more fringe theories. The sheer complexity and age of the site have led some to propose that Göbekli Tepe was built with knowledge passed down from an earlier, advanced, lost civilization, like Atlantis survivors. This idea posits that a highly sophisticated culture existed before the last ice age, and that Göbekli Tepe is a remnant of their wisdom, a kind of knowledge vault left for future generations. While there is no archaeological evidence to support this, the mystery of the site fuels such speculation and captures the imagination of those who believe our history is far more complex than we assume. These theories often point to the incredible engineering feats and the apparent advanced symbolic knowledge as evidence of a pre-existing, forgotten culture that was wiped out by a global cataclysm at the end of the last ice age. The construction of Göbekli Tepe is a mystery in itself. The builders were hunter-gatherers, people with no metal tools, no wheels, and no domesticated animals to pull the massive stones. The pillars were carved from local limestone using simple stone tools, a process that would have been incredibly labor-intensive. It's estimated that creating and moving a single 20-ton pillar would have required hundreds of people working in perfect coordination. The sheer scale of the project suggests a level of organization and shared vision that was previously thought to be impossible for pre-agricultural societies. How did they do it? The quarry for the pillars has been found just a few hundred meters from the site. There, an unfinished pillar lies still attached to the bedrock, its edges marked by the precise, systematic grooves of flint tools. It's a silent testament to the incredible human effort involved. The builders would have used simple stone tools, perhaps sharpened flint or obsidian, to peck away at the soft limestone, a process that would have taken months or even years for a single pillar. Then, using simple ropes made from twisted plant fibers and brute force, they would have somehow dragged these colossal stones to the top of the hill, possibly using wooden rollers or sleds. Once on the site, they were lifted into place using an unknown method, perhaps involving earthen ramps or a simple lever system. The precise joints and the intricate carvings on the pillars show a mastery of stonework that seems impossible without metal tools. This was not the work of simple, primitive people, but of highly skilled craftsmen, with a deep understanding of their materials, and an unyielding commitment to their project. The carvings show only wild animals, suggesting a world before farming and domestication. There are no images of wheat, barley, or any other domesticated crops. The landscape of the region at that time was a fertile, lush environment, full of game. The people were rich in resources and had the leisure time to dedicate themselves to monumental construction. The evidence of a rich and abundant environment comes from the analysis of the animal bones, which show a wide variety of prey, from small birds to massive wild cattle, and the discovery of tools for processing wild grains. They had a reliable food source, which gave them the time and energy to build these incredible structures. Perhaps the most perplexing part of the Göbekli Tepe story is its end. Around 8000 BCE, after nearly 1,600 years of use, the site was deliberately and systematically filled with sand and rubble. Layer after layer was carefully placed, burying the massive pillars and enclosures. The fill material was not just random dirt, it was a mix of limestone fragments, broken tools, and other refuse, carefully packed around the monuments. The site was not destroyed or abandoned in a hurry. The burial was a careful, intentional act. It's as if the builders decided to put their greatest work to sleep. Some theorize this was a ritual closing of the temple. The world had changed. The climate had grown drier, and the game animals that sustained the hunter-gatherers became scarcer. People were beginning to shift to farming and a more sedentary lifestyle. The old ways and old beliefs no longer served them. Perhaps they buried the site to honor their old way of life, or maybe they believed that the power of the temple needed to be contained. By burying it, they preserved it. Others believe the shift in climate and societal change made the site obsolete. As the population shifted to farming, the grand feasts and gatherings of hunter-gatherers would have become unfeasible. The site's purpose had been tied to a way of life that was disappearing. The builders may have simply filled it in to clear the space or to leave a monumental monument as a final gesture. The deliberate burial, however, preserved it for 10,000 years, waiting for us to find it. The burial itself is one of the greatest acts of preservation in all of archaeology. The dirt and rubble acted as a natural shield, protecting the delicate carvings and the massive stones from erosion and the destructive forces of time. The very act that ended the site's use is what allowed it to survive as a pristine time capsule of the Stone Age. Göbekli Tepe forces us to ask a series of profound questions. Was it a temple? An observatory? A gathering place? Why are there no signs of daily life, houses, farms, around it? Does it hint at an earlier, forgotten civilization? The questions are as deep as the site is old. Some scholars now believe that Göbekli Tepe is evidence that history is much older than we think. That our narrative of human progress, from primitive cave dwellers to farmers and city builders, is wrong. What if our timeline is wrong? What if Göbekli Tepe is just the tip of an iceberg, evidence of civilizations lost to the last ice age? It forces us to consider the possibility that before the end of the last ice age, around 10,000 BCE, a sophisticated society existed that we have yet to discover. The rapid rise of agriculture, art, and complex societies after the Ice Age, a period often called the Neolithic Revolution, may not have been a revolution at all, but a reclamation of knowledge that was nearly lost. The survivors of a great global cataclysm, perhaps the end of the last Ice Age, may have carried with them a fragment of a lost tradition. Göbekli Tepe could be a part of that fragment, a place where they tried to pass on their spiritual and astronomical knowledge before it was forgotten forever. The carvings themselves point to this idea. The depiction of a scorpion, a vulture, and a spider could be a cosmic map, a warning of a past event, or a guide to the future. The star alignments suggest a deep understanding of celestial mechanics. It's not just a temple, it's a record, a library carved in stone, waiting to be deciphered. Göbekli Tepe is more than a ruin. It's a question mark carved in stone, challenging everything we thought we knew about our origins. Was it humanity's first temple, a school of the stars, or proof of an ancient knowledge long forgotten? One thing is certain: the story of civilization did not begin in Egypt or Mesopotamia. It began here on a hill in Turkey, 12,000 years ago. What do you believe Göbekli Tepe truly was? Drop your theories in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to Golden Civilizations, because history's biggest mysteries are only just beginning. 12,000 years ago, before writing, before farming, before the first known cities, humans built something extraordinary.